I heard that the bride's brother had finished high school. However, it would be a disgrace for us to accept the poor man without a university degree as one of the family. At my dear sister's wedding, I was moved to tears when I saw his radiant beauty. Wishing that our late father could witness it, his PH suddenly made fun of me in his speech. I should prescribe him some medicine for stupidity. He seemed like he was trying to be funny, but he was the only one laughing, this troublemaker spoiling what should have been a joyous occasion. He kept throwing insults directed only at me. While everyone began to feel uncomfortable, my sister, the bride, began to laugh. Christo seemed disconcerted by his reaction, but when she regained her composure, she coldly addressed him with these words. "He will come to regret everything he said. My name is Jaden Alvarez. My father was a self-employed businessman, and thanks to his motorized success, our family of 4, including my parents and my sister, lived a fairly comfortable life. With our comfortable life, I focused a lot on my schoolwork. Of course, I also valued participating in committees and going out with friends. Thanks to this, I was recognized as an honor student who performed well and who was trusted. Very proud of it, I continued to work hard. I always had someone by my side, and I was never in trouble. I lived a life without despair. However, everything changed after a certain accident. The winter of my grade expired just when I was thinking of buckling up to go to university. My father, Jackson Alvarez, died in a car accident. My mother, who was already fragile, was bedridden due to the emotional consequences of the accident. She had to go frequently to the hospital. We also discovered that my father had left debts. Although his business seemed to be prospering, it seemed that it was just that. Between the funeral expenses and the payment of the debts, our savings were reduced to almost nothing. Given the circumstances, I decided not to go to university. I did it to maintain our daily life, my mother's medical expenses, and my little sister Elena's education. Without work experience with a high school degree, I was hired as a restaurant employee. A friend of my late father, who was aware of our situation, offered me a job in the restaurant, her property. But that income was not enough. On my days off and before shifts, I also accepted a job delivering newspapers and did some part-time work at home. A year after finishing high school, my mother's health improved, and she was able to take care of herself, of housework and simple part-time jobs. Mom, Jaden, I won't go to university. I can't let you two carry all the load. He suddenly proposed. What are you saying, Elena? You should pursue your dreams without worrying about the house. That's always how Elena is. You said you wanted to go to university, not both. My mother and I did not agree with her idea. I did not want Elena to give up what I had. Furthermore, with our combined efforts, our living situation stabilized a little. It was not exactly easy, but not until the point that Elena had to abandon her dreams to help life. Okay, so go your own way. After Jaden repeated these words a few times, it seemed like she finally understood. A year passed. I finished everything about the university. Fortunately, Elena, who was going to graduate from high school, has decided on her future path. She entered the IB League, which is not known throughout the country. She showed me and our mother an email that said, "Accepted." And look here, what Elena Alvarez said. As a student, scholarship student, was chosen as a scholarship student. And surprisingly, this scholarship covers all expenses from admission to graduation. Wow, isn't it wonderful? You have achieved it. Elena apparently had tried very hard not to be a burden on the family. Even though I told her not to worry about us with gratitude for her efforts, I thought it was a compliment. 3 more years passed. Elena continued to work hard in college and set out to move on to get a job. I will miss her, but I sincerely celebrated her new beginning. Watching my sister pursue her dreams with so much passion made me as happy as if it were my own life. Time flies. 4 or so years have passed since Alana graduated from university. By then, our lives had completely stabilized. My mother still had frequent sleep problems, health, but mentally she was as resilient as before our father passed away. As for Alana, after university, she got a job in the administrative department of a large company. From what I have heard, Alana learns quickly and is very well regarded. There are many experienced administrators there, but it seems like she works very well. Suddenly, Alana announces that she is getting married. Her fiancé is an executive at her company and, curiously, the son of the current CEO. I think his name is Juan Romero. Despite being the CEO's son, he is incredibly humble and authentic. She is quite a charm, popular among many. But it is an honor for her brother to think that she has been chosen by a man like that. I felt almost paternally relieved that she did not end up with the wrong man. There had to be a meeting with the Romero family. Unfortunately, my mother fell just at that moment to fill that void. I had to attend at short notice. I joined the meeting at my mother's place. Thank you for coming today, especially considering the time. Mr. Jack Romero, father of Juan and CEO of the company where Alana works, began her greeting. Given that he is the CEO of a large company, he seems like a dignified figure. When I asked him why his wife was not present, he answered that his wife died a few years ago. Well, I should have asked Alana for more details before. I had no idea about this. I'm so sorry. There was an awkward silence during that time. Only the sound of the rain echoed loudly around as Jack mentioned the weather was unfortunately very rainy anyway. Alina is a wonderful lady, Jack continued, praising Alina, mentioning her intelligence and beauty repeatedly. Graduated from a renowned university, right? He was also all praise for Alina's university. It is quite an honor that someone like Alina joins our company and marries my son. What a blessing. Oh, thank you for those kind words. It's nice. I praised my sister so much, but it's a little too much, and I can't help but smile. By the way, with what a few moments ago was a full smile, Jack's face becomes slightly serious, and he looks me directly in the eyes. I met his gaze, wondering what would come next. What university did you graduate from? Well, actually surprised by the sudden question about my education, I hesitated to sigh. I finished high school and started working, which is quite different from Elena, but lying about it would be of no use. Lies and misdeeds always come to light, so I decided to be honest. I didn't go to university. I had to start working right after high school due to family circumstances. Ah, yes, well. After hearing about my academic training, Jack seemed a little surprised. Then he was thoughtful for a moment. It seems that the reason why she didn't go to university is that my explanation was insufficient. Alina tried to explain herself, however, she was interrupted by Jack. You don't need to explain more. I understand that there may be personal reasons. Although she chose her words carefully, it was clear that she looked down on me because he didn't have higher education. He tried to keep a smile, but it seemed more like a grimace. Also, the end of his words from before had risen slightly, and there was a suppressed giggle, as if he couldn't contain a giggle. I'm sorry for making you wait. Here's the appetizer on the plate. At that moment, the main course we had ordered was served. We were both excited about the marriage, and the initial meeting was supposed to be joyful. However, the atmosphere became tense after just one conversation, as more and more delicious dishes were served. The atmosphere was not conducive to enjoying the flavors and our meeting. The day of Alina and Juan's wedding ended when I saw her with beautiful makeup and an impressive wedding dress. I couldn't hold back my tears. Don't cry in front of me, Jordan. I'm sorry, I said. I had to take Alina to the altar in place of our late father, but given how I felt, it seemed like a titanic task. Time to enter. Guided by the assistant, we took our places. The door opened, and unusually loud music filled the room. I sincerely remember my memories. From that moment on, they were a little blurry, partly because of nervousness, and partly because my vision was blurred by tears. But what I do remember is the feeling of having a chest full of emotions accumulated over the years. The difficulties Alina faced after our father's death, which changed our lives, and her efforts to save on tuition fees were immeasurable. Please take care of Alina as I trusted my sister, I whispered to Juan, and he nodded back at me in confirmation. His response returned to my seat, drying my eyes with a towel. The reception continued pleasantly, and finally, Jack gave a formal speech. He began with words of thanks and went on for a long time. He must have spoken for about 15 minutes. I thought he would end soon, but he started a new topic, talking about the university. He began to look at me. I heard that the girlfriend's brother hasn't gone to university, he told me, while revealing my background and my permit. The room was filled with murmurs. I didn't know if they were gossip about my past or complaints directed at Jack. Alina has an impressive background, but her brother, well, it would be a shame for us to accept that poor man without a university degree as one of the family, Jack said with a mocking smile. He seemed to be trying to make a joke, but he was the only one laughing. The troublemaker who ruined the atmosphere kept throwing insults at me personally for a while more. Well, that's all for my part. It concluded abruptly. Normally, there would be applause, but the guests were in a state of shock, similar to what we call being disgusted, breaking that tense atmosphere. Suddenly, a loud burst of laughter resounded. Everyone looked around, wondering what was happening. After searching for a few seconds, it became evident that the source of the laughter was Alina herself. Jack looked at her with a perplexed expression, although he did not say it out loud. His expression strongly conveyed the feeling of, "What is so funny?" Even after seeing Jack's face, Alina continued laughing with tears in her eyes. She was afraid that her makeup would be ruined. When her laughter subsided, she let out an exasperated sigh and looked at Jack. "Mr. President, don't you think that you should at least remember the faces of the shareholders?" Alina's words were met with agreement from Juan, who launched into a sharp look at her father. "You don't remember that my brother attended the shareholders meeting? He is one of the main shareholders of our company," Juan said. "There were things I didn't know about her, like that his wife had died. However, I didn't think he recognized me at all when we met. I introduced myself, but I thought it was a mere formality. But it seems that for him, it was really the first time." Jack?" He could only answer with a question mark. He seemed very nervous. Well, I got up slowly and approached him. "Alina has an impressive record, but what about me?" He seemed dumbfounded by shock. He must have realized who he was talking to and what he had said. According to Alina's words, my father owned many shares. When my father passed away, I was only in the 10th grade. I was too young to invest in shares. So my mother became the official heir of the shares. However, my mother was not in a good mental state, so the inherited shares remained dormant for some time. When Alina arrived at university, my mother's mental state had improved considerably. We finally had time to study the inherited stocks. Most of the companies my father had invested in had grown a lot. The profits were more than enough to get us out of our financial troubles. Now I can depend solely on my restaurant business. Starting from then on, I became interested in shares, and like my father, I began to invest my surplus little by little. I increased my holdings, and now I can say that I am a majority shareholder in Jack's company, although it was a company mentioned in my father's notes. Sometimes, I think it was a very risky move. I'm glad the company was successful. "It's a shame, Dad," Juan said to the trembling Jack with a stupefied look. "I admired you as a president who made our business grow." Juan, I think the words of his sin brought him back to reality, and began to shake while pronouncing Juan's name. "But I can't believe that you don't even remember the face of a shareholder. You lack conscience as a president. Even before that, it is unacceptable to insult someone like that, especially because he is from our family." He cried, repeatedly muttering the name of his sin. "I'm sorry, Dad, but you are the misfortune of our family," quoting the words that Jack had said before. Juan rebuked him vigorously. Jack let go of me, and with a resentful but pale face, he looked at me. Why was I going to buy shares of my company? A high school student pointed at me and asked weakly. At this point, logic no longer mattered in the slightest. "You need studies to buy shares." Incredulously, Jack turned red and looked down. "Well, if I had to give a reason, it's because my father left a note saying that I should buy shares in this company. Have you heard of Jackson Alvarez?" When I mentioned my father's name, the color drained from his face, and he turned pale again. That guy had an accident. His tremor was anything but normal. When he saw this, Juan asked for help and ended the wedding. I bought shares in Jack's company for 2 reasons. One was because Elena worked there. The other reason was what I told Jack. My father left most of the shares he owned in his notes. My father belonged to his partners. Among them was the name of Jack's company. But I never imagined that Elena would end up working there and marrying El Heredero. Curious about this miraculous connection, I did a little research after that meeting. I found some suspicious things. It seems that my father did business with yours in the past. I told Juan on the phone while I was examining my father's belongings. Yes, I have heard of Jackson Alvarez. At that time, I would have been in primary or secondary school. I found my father's agenda on the day of that unforgettable accident. There is an entry about having dinner with Jack. Seriously? So what did my father and yours do? Well, I took out a confidentiality agreement and other documents from the file and started reading the details of their business. Wait, that business, according to Juan, the work that my father and Jack did together was what made Jack's company skyrocket. From what I could gather, they were doing a promising business together. My father died tragically, and Jack continued the work on his own and became a huge success. A disturbing story was emerging, but it was too soon to conclude. Nothing added up. The development and conclusion of the story still did not add up. In that case, I wanted records of when my father took over Jackson's work. I will investigate it. Please do it. If you need help, please ask Elena. I will also let you know that I understand it. Shortly after the wedding, Juan went to the office to see Jack's room. He had been hospitalized for extreme stress. With the help of Elena, they investigated thoroughly and found records from when he took over the business. He was cautious, but the essential thing was that my mother is mentally unstable, so Jack could do whatever he wanted, taking advantage of the state she was in. My distraught mother forced her to sign a contract that was overwhelmingly advantageous to him. She was furious. But I knew I couldn't rush things, or all our efforts would be in vain. I told Elena to stay calm. With this, the connection was established in the story. A month later, Jack seemed to be back, but he was far from normal. He was saying nonsense things at one point, and suddenly he went out and drowned in alcohol. It must have been hard for him. Juan saw his father like that, but he approached Jack for the sake of the investigation. I had to pick my father up from the bar after he had drunk too much, and I got him to stay alone, so Juan spoke to us on the phone about the business and our father. He said with pride, for some reason, he sabotaged the brakes of the car that Jackson was driving. Juan's voice trembled more and more as it continued to be audible through the speaker. We heard him sniffle and his voice faltered. He also forced Jackson's wife to go into a lot of debt, and then he took over Jackson's business. Essentially, he wanted to take over Jackson's business to expand his own. Both Elena and I were speechless upon hearing it. After all, the cause of our father's death could not have been an accident. It could have been deliberately caused by a man named Jack Romero. Any normal person would find it difficult to find words after such a revelation. In the face of this heartbreaking story, neither Elena nor I could shed a tear. The only thing we heard from the speaker were Juan's dull words and his continuous apologies. However, our father passed away almost 10 years ago. All we know is that a drunk Jack mentioned tampering with the brakes, and there is no concrete evidence that he intentionally caused the accident. How can we bring him to justice? After some thought, I demanded his resignation as the majority shareholder. The embarrassing scene that he staged, especially at the wedding of a board member, was unforgivable. According to what Juan told me, he had been dependent on alcohol lately and had not worked on his reputation. He had already hit rock bottom, and no one protested when he resigned with Juan's support. Another member of the board was promoted CEO. After that, I put all my effort into finding the mechanic. At that time, Juan even took a leave of absence to help me. "I will fix this for my father," he repeated several times with determination. I honestly found him admirable. At the same time, I felt that he was an incredible son-in-law and that I could confide in my sister, Elena. A year after starting our investigation about Jack and my father, we finally found the mechanic who manipulated the brakes. He was a normal worker in a small shop in Alabama. However, he was an ex when he found out that his actions had caused the death of some people. He left his job and closed in on himself. When Juan told him about Jack, this former mechanic confessed through tears. "It seems that now there is a big building, but the workshop was small. I didn't earn enough to support my family," he said, trembling, revealing his traumatic past, detail by detail. "Then your father Jack arrived with a dryer. He said if he followed the plan, the payment would be considerable. I knew that the drying was suspicious, but I was blinded by the money. The amount that Jack offered was astonishing. I have always had doubts about whether I should confess or not, but I was afraid of being punished, not of the reprisals of that man." She was terrified out of fear and guilt. She confined herself to her room. The family she wanted to protect abandoned her, and since then, she has lived a miserable existence. "Let's go to the police together," I suggested, wanting to atone for his sins. He nodded vigorously with his eyes red from crying. During the police interrogation, he confessed everything. He manipulated the brakes under Jack's instructions and took the money, and that caused my father's death. He said it all in his statement. Jack was taken as a person of great interest. The investigation into his misdeeds and illegal activities led to his formal arrest. But even with the arrest of Jack, my father is not going to return. The days passed full of emptiness and without any sense of achievement. One day, upon returning home, I saw an unknown luxury car parked at the entrance. Asking me what was happening, I entered the house and found Elena and Juan in the living room. My mother was serving tea, which indicated that my arrival would take place moments after your visits. "Sorry for the interruption. We are sorry for having come without warning." "Don't worry, but what's wrong? You seem very formal. Both of you were dressed in evening clothes for some reason." "Well, I have something I want to discuss with you, Jaiden," Juan said with a serious expression. "Jack Romero is unforgivable. Can his son marry the daughter of the man who was betrayed by him? That is equally unacceptable. That's how I feel." Juan then, with tears in his eyes, began to talk about breaking up with Elena. Because of Elena's calm attitude, it seemed like she had been consulted beforehand. "I see. If you want to break up, do it. After all, you are both adults. Your decision, Jaiden. But that's only if you really want to break up." Juan looked at me as if asking me what I meant. "If you feel responsible for what your father did, and that's why you say this is another story." Juan seemed surprised. "Maybe I've nailed the responsibility. What that man did is his. You who were only a primary school student at the time. You don't have to take any blame. So I have a request. I looked into his eyes with enthusiasm, despite his confusion. Continue. If your feelings for Elena have not changed, please make her happy, Jaden. I'm sorry, you're right. My feelings haven't changed. I still really want to be with her, he said, crying. Elena, sitting next to her, covered her face with both hands, blushing. Elena, is it okay with you? Yes. Thank you, Jaden. Somehow the mood made me feel embarrassed too. To lighten the mood, we all laughed for a while, including my mother. As the day declined, the sky turned orange. Listening to the distant crows, I started talking to my father's tombstone. It's been a while, Dad. I informed you of the latest events. Last year, Elena got married. Her husband is an executive alive in his company, a very honest man. The flowers seemed to nod in the breeze. It seemed that my father was happy for Elena's happiness. I also briefly mentioned Jack. But don't worry, let's make sure, like the mechanic who manipulated the brakes. But he did not confess out of fear. Perhaps Jack was also afraid of reprisals. His unusual reaction at Elena and Juan's wedding seemed to indicate the answer. What was it like to occupy a position acquired through deception? Now that he has lost your reputation and credibility, how do you feel? I wish I could experience the same pain as my father. Maybe I am evil for thinking that. I will still keep my head and live. I aspire to be someone strong, someone who is not ashamed of himself. By conveying these wishes to my father, I picked up and left the cemetery.